Welcome to the Nurture Pod. My name is Iris Sullivan Dare, and I'm here with the indomitable Ginger Edwards. And this is a place where we explore that riparian zone between what is and what is possible, the infinite possibilities. And how do we get there? How do we get
Mm.
to something that meets everyone's needs? That's that's our lifelong desire. How are you
And qu
doing this
and
day?
quest.
Our quest, our
Um,
gee.
yeah, I wanted to record this. I'm glad we took a little bit of breather. You had a show last week, an art show that you hung, and so we took a week off. And I think it's good that we did because the shock and awe of what the election did, I think it was almost like I had some time to process it. So I feel like I am in a more grounded space on this Monday than I would have been last week. So I guess that's my answer. I don't know how I'm doing exactly. What am I nurturing? I'm going to ask myself that question
Mm,
because I like that
nice.
one better than what I'm doing. Because I'm
Oh
like, what am
yeah,
I
yeah,
doing? I'm kind
yeah.
of spinning. I have been nurturing in myself. Yeah, this really, really, really trying hard to listen to people who I find inspirational and like listening to lots of different voices talk about this and then trying to feel with my like intuitive heart like what resonates for me and try to pick really trying to feel like what's ringing a bell for me and the responses. So that's what I've been nurturing is like a really careful listening to different voices and books and even ones that have nothing to do with what the election at all, just like things about completely other topics that I am bringing in like wisdom from that I relates to how I feel about it. So how about you? What are you nurturing?
So I, for sure, because I was hanging the show last week, um, I really had to. I had to like kind of it's an intense thing to do a big installation. And so and I had, had people helping me for sure, but I realized that like I couldn't go down the like despair rabbit hole because I was creating an energetic space for the community. And um and so I kind of had I kind of needed to just kind of like, I'm like, all right, just gonna set that aside for right now. That is what is. And I'm gonna do this other work right now. Um, and it was interesting because I really became super clear that like the role of artists and poets is so important in these times. And I felt that mantle of that kind of responsibility as an artist and a poet to step into that. And so that was like a really like kind of like a positive. So I didn't spend the week feeling um crushed. Uh I mean, not that I, not that I was free of it, but just like it's like you have to respond in the moment. Like
Yeah.
and then the other thing the thing that happened in conjunction to all of that was happening last week and what I was needing to physically be doing was I had this big insight about I know we've talked about puppets, like those kind of like automatic responses to impulse, to whatever impulse or not impulse, what it like input from the
Mm-hmm.
universe.
Mm-hmm.
So like often a stress response, but it can also be, and I suddenly had this realization that some of those automatic responses are super useful in a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you talking about that idea with permaculture of is it a problem or is it an opportunity?
Mm-hmm.
And I had this like real shift of how puppets are both problem and opportunity. And that like for instance, I have a fawn puppet that like when people, like I just, when people, I'm in a situation where someone is being violent, my go-to is to de-escalate and to calm and to get people out of there. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's been my role in the past when I've been around violent people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of ways that people are violent. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of me that doesn't like that like fawning response and has been kind of like, like feel shame about that. But I suddenly realized I'm like, oh my God, that's such a useful one because when it escalates, then people die. And
Mm-hmm.
so, or get really hurt or, all the things. And it's like the fawn is not the end all. The fawn is regroup.
Mm-hmm.
It provides an opportunity for regrouping. And I feel like that is where I feel like I am right now,
Mm-hmm.
is in a place of kind of regrouping. And I feel like that the gestalt of our country is a lot of people are kind of like, wait, what? No, 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 no. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can either, yeah. So I have more to say about that, but that's a lot to say that I already just said. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, it's all really good, and I resonate with that a lot. Actually, one of the books I've been listening to is How to Stop People Pleasing, which is really random, but I have been getting so much clarity about that. And fawning and people pleasing are very close, right? They're really
Hmm.
closely related. I've been getting so much clarity about like our country's reaction, how we as a nation mirror like these interpersonal dynamics. Like, and I think I've heard someone say, like, oh, America just went back to its toxic ex. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
that was actually one of the best analogies I could wrap my head around, because I was like, it really does feel kind of like that. And it feels like, oh, so many of us know better and have, said, oh, but this choice would be so much better, right? But like so many people chose to go back to what we know is what, maybe even they know at some level is a toxic ex, right? Like they've seen it in action, and they're gonna go get some more of that. And so I do like the framework you kind of gave us. Well, before we went on the show, you were like, I want to do this little. So can you talk about, let's just set up these little categories so we can like break this down. Because we know if you listen to our podcast, we're not going to like start pulling apart policies and like, we're going to talk about the cultural responses and solutions that are more coming from this personal place of nurture. And so we want to kind of craft this little maybe framework.
Yeah.
We can talk about it so we don't get too far off in any one direction. So I'm going to let you set that up and then we'll just dive in.
So a number of years ago, I did a bunch of training around a collaborative governance system
Mm,
that gets called sociocracy. It's a Dutch system. And the person I was learning it from is this man named John Buck, who wrote the first book in English on the system. And he went and studied there and learned Dutch so that he could participate and learn about this process of collaborative um, circle governance. That is actually, it's a very much like a fractal. So like it can be very small groups and it can feed into very large groups. And it does there, like police stations and factories and nursing co-ops and blah, blah. Um, so the Scorcher Artisan Cooperative was a second worker co-op in the world to adopt sociocracy, which is kind of a cool thing. So anyway, long story short, he was trying to translate these concepts from a Germanic language into English. And English is a layered language of Norman, like French influence and Germanic influence, and waves of you know, colonialization, basically. It's not really colonialization, but what do you call that when you invade? Invasions and new power structures. And so what he was finding is that the words that were working very well in the Dutch language, when you use the English equivalents, they had a negative connotation. So
mm,
like ring, we think of ringleaders. We think of like there's like a ring of thieves. It has a very
right.
dark dark
Criminal ring. Yeah.
criminal bias to
Mm-hmm.
it instead of a
Mm-hmm.
neutral. It's not neutral. It's not emotionally neutral.
Mm.
Versus circle has a more positive, a circle of love, a circle of
Mm-hmm.
friends, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So and that sent him down this rabbit hole of realizing the emotional context of all of our words carry these charges. And then also one of the things he brought to us was this idea that we have, how do we understand, and they had different words for how do we understand that we don't have in English. And then when he went and did some studying, he's a super intellectual, but then when he went and he did some studying, he realized English has these old words that are equivalent to some of these words that were in Dutch. And so and that don't get used very much. So for instance, when we know something, we just have just one way to say it. I know that, but there's
Mm.
actually a lot of different ways that we access information. And so when we understand something with our intellect, we might say somebody is witty,
Mm-hmm.
but long ago they would say like I wit that,
Mm.
which is I can grok it intellectually. I understand how that mechanism works.
Mm-hmm.
I can see how that fits together, and it's very very intellectual mind base is wit is
Mm.
a way of knowing. I know that because I figured it out. So if somebody figured out a math problem, they use their wit, right?
Hmm.
And
Does that
then
have anything to do with the word with? Like I'm with that?
it's WIT.
Yeah. So because
It's
when I hear you say I with that, I've heard a slang. It's like I'm with that.
oh, that's interesting. I don't know. We should look that up. I don't know.
Um, but go on.
But
This is fascinating.
so
That was just my thought.
there's the brain, the intellectual way of knowing. And then there is like no, the old version of no is like when you say somebody knows someone in the biblical sense,
Hmm.
which is like body knowledge, but
Mm-hmm.
specifically experiential knowledge, right? Like you know how to ride a bike.
Mm.
You can't look at a bike and figure it out with your wit.
Mm.
Your body knows how to ride a bike because you've ridden a bike before, if you know how to ride a bike.
Mm.
And so that's like kind of like more like heart, like and then the last way of knowing is ken, Ken, and which is still in use in like Scottish,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yep.
Scotland. And to ken something is more like what my friend who was a homicide detective would talk about, like that gut feeling
Mm-hmm.
of like you walk in and it's like something is not right. And it's not, it's like you act immediately before you even know you're doing any, like you're
Mm-hmm.
you're you're that kind of like that knowing that is
Mm.
that I can something wasn't quite right, or I can that you were going to call, or like
Right.
and that's very like gut. And I think probably our microbiome is probably part of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. We definitely have that
that.
language around I feel it in my gut. And I think it's like, intuitive knowing, wouldn't you say? Is that close?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And and so yeah, so it's like we talk around it, but we don't have like a specific vocabulary word that's in current usage. But both of these words,
Mm.
wit and ken, are
I
like
love
I
it.
think, are
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So bringing us back to the current state of the world,
Mm-hmm.
I think that I tend to, when something's really hard and kind of scary,
Mm.
then I tend to go straight up into my head and I start
Yes.
to like look at it and pick it apart, intellectualize it, and yada yada yada. And I would say like, well, why whose fault is it, or whatever? Like, what did they
Right.
do wrong? There's
Right.
that. And then I would say that the knowing, that kind of heart knowledge, is kind of like who who's to blame, is part of that too, is part of
Oh,
that
okay.
heart thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like who's hurting us? Like, like
Mm,
who do we blame for this? We have to blame
mm,
somebody. Like,
mm,
and then it's like, what, like, whatever. And then like
mm.
so anyway, so just like kind of trying to check in on
Yeah.
all those ways of knowingness. Like, am I okay right now? And my head was like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, like anxiety, anxiety, anxiety.
Yeah.
But
So
like,
let's just start there. Let's just start with our wit.
yeah.
And we're to break this down, and everybody at home follow along in your own self. But I think that's beautiful. And I mean, I can relate it to like this kind of somatic, the body knows, the body is having an experience, an emotional experience. Cause when you said no, it's like the body does know that like what's going on. There's been a change in the atmosphere. The brain is going crazy, right? Cause it's got all this information pouring in from all these different sources. And then this intuitive sense, yeah, it's more of a spiritual kind of like deeper intuitive vibe. So I think those are all really interesting, and they are very different. As I just kind of check in briefly with myself, I can feel how different those responses are. And I'm just one person over here. So let's start with the head, because that's where our
What's
culture likes to hang out. We absolutely, like, I think 99.9% of what we're getting is wit, right? It's just everybody's giving their opinions, their observations, their
the talking?
predictions. Yeah, literally the talking head society. And of course, I I mean, I was gonna do this like with elements too, but this is like, the air element was just like talk, 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 and listen, listen, and all the. So yeah, what is your wit telling? Like, where are you
I
wit wise?
I want to hear where you are.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm also a mindset coach, so this is interesting because I've been really trying to apply my coaching to this in my head. Like, these are my thoughts, and listening to other people's thoughts and trying to play coach a little bit, as I hear other people talking and just being like, oh, what an interesting thought. Like, is that true? Kind of doing my little coaching analysis, which we'd say, oh, there's a circumstance, Trump got elected. And then there's all these thoughts, right? And it's really interesting to see the thoughts that rise. And then you have to start asking, like, and then how do those thoughts make you feel? Well, there's lots of different thoughts being offered up, and they make me, there's fear, there's anger. Mostly I'm hearing those two: hopelessness, grief. There's all these range of emotions that I'm hearing. And so, and then those lead to actions, right? And then those cause a result. So I've just kind of been kind of break it down in myself and notice how my thoughts lead me in certain emotions and then how that affects my actions. So that's where my brain has been playing around in, and also just trying to, like I said, make these analysis, like finding the right words to like understand. I mean, initially, so I'll just go back and stop talking about it
Yeah.
so metaphorically and just talk about me. Initially, I was shocked, and then I had deep disappointment, and then I went into, yeah, grief, I think, as I thought about all the things that could potentially happen. And then I went to fear, which then, was like, oh, well, if that happens, what is this going to happen? And this going to happen, and this going to happen. And then, yeah, anger at, people not caring enough, or, not thinking beyond a certain level. And then I try to get into like, but I mean, the reality check that we just got, am I really that shocked? When it came down to like processing the emotion, am I really shocked? No, because I
Yeah.
know where we live, and I know the phase of capitalism we're in, and I, not to dig too deep into it, but like, this is actually on par with the systems that have been running. Like, the dominant culture
Yes.
runs late stage capitalism, patriarchy. Yeah, why wouldn't they elect this person? It actually makes a lot of sense if you look at the
Yeah.
system. It's not the system being broken, it's the system performing perfectly. This escalation of this energy, right? The billionaire got what they wanted. Everybody's stocks went up. Like, this is like, and the men escalated power, and it's like, yeah, yeah, that's what patriarchy does. That's its performing. If we thought
Yeah.
that a multiracial woman with a Jewish husband was going to take the presidency, like, what kind of fantasy were we in? Like, really? I mean, like, in the current culture we actually exist in, and so yeah, so part of me was kind of like disappointed in myself that I allowed myself to fantasize this other, like, oh no, we're this far along, and then the awakening of like, oh no, 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 we're actually exactly where I knew we were, given the country that we're in. And And so that was like disappointing, I think, on multiple levels for myself. Like for me almost like, oh, I it's so easy to get, I think it's because we want it like so badly, just not have to take all this heavy energy on. Like we don't want to fight all the
Mm,
time. And so I think there's this constant hope that someone's just going to step in there and make us better. And it kind of keeps coming back to like, no, these systems don't get dismantled that way. This culture is operating the way the culture operates. So that's where my head's at. It's like this is actually a predictable result. And for me to have thought something else is kind of wild. Hopeful, maybe indicative of my aspirations where I'd like it
mhm,
to go, right? Certainly felt in line with where I thought we could go, but in reality, yeah, not there yet. And I think reality is a really good place. It's a really good place to be right now. We're just staring at what is.
mhm.
And that's sobering. It is like that relationship, like that you're in, like the toxic relationship. Like you can be like, oh, but it can get better. I can fix him. I can recycle, and we can, have potlucks and all the things. And then, but the reality is, we're kind of dressing up these little bubbles of existence in a much more misaligned system that we're existing in. And I think that it's a sobering reality check, but I'm not that shocked. That's where my wit is. That's my brain right now.
Yeah, I think that probably is where a lot of people are, like,
Mm,
if and it's I want to talk about my heart and then go back to my head
okay.
because my heart because I felt like I had to keep my heart open in
This
order
is your
to
knowing. This is your heart
this is my
knowing.
knowing. Yeah,
Okay.
like I felt like I needed to be in a place of not shutting down my heart in order to mount the show.
Yeah.
So like I was like, okay, it's like, all right, you're up, batter up, and so I think that like some of my like knowing feelings, um, and maybe this is fantasy too, but I just was like, oh, this isn't new. This is old. Like we've been here before so many times, us
Mm,
humans,
yeah.
me probably many lives, and I was like, okay, so that pain like so because like when I look at him, when I hear him, when I like I can bear it's nearly intolerable because it's so clear that he's so clearly ill,
Mm,
mentally ill,
mm,
and so much like and he's just like ejecting all of this like he's tantruming
mm,
like a very he's tantruming like a very angry child.
mm,
And I think like for someone to check in with him in any way, I don't I was I think that they must be in so much pain if they resonate with that amount
mm,
of,
mm,
and so my heart has just been just really thinking a lot about it's like the like it's like the other shoe drops. Like this is like I knew the other shoe was going to drop, right? So
mm,
like that feels like yeah, like it like we've been deferring taking care of children for multiple generations now. Like,
mm,
like 3, 4, 5 maybe, so like if they say that this demographic of these young angry young men and it's like, well, it makes sense. We haven't been, like we haven't we tell a brand new baby that their mother doesn't deserve care. They
mm,
come home at the hospital to stressed out parents who with no support, you know, and it's
mm,
like multiple generations. So like how stressed out was their grandmother when she was having their mother. So like all of this, like, and then yeah, like we do have a crisis of how do we help men transition to this higher octave when, you know, and I would say that it's part of this balancing. This is all head going back up, right up, back up to the head. But like I would say that the balancing between feminism and trying to like uplift women in some ways, women doing that and as a means of like becoming more like men. And so instead of like, I would say energetically, there was like some revenge kind of vibe, like there's that we actually became more powerful by adopting a lower energetic state in some ways. And so, and then trying to say that like, I don't know, I just think about my mom and how much she both hated men and
Mm.
also deferred to men. And it's just a very,
Yeah. Yeah. I
you
think
know,
it's interesting. I mean, there's certainly a gender conversation going on, which there has been a big gender upheaval conversation going on prior to this. This is one of the issues that's being thrown up to for the culture to battle around with, right? Is gender and like what the roles are and what the descriptions are. And one of the interesting things I heard was that in patriarchy and this kind of system that we're all raised in, that women are really acculturated to kind of make things better, like, make people please in that way of like making sure everybody's emotional needs are met, making sure the relationship works, making sure everybody in the room has their needs met, that kind of thing. That's what we're trained to do very, very young. And men are not. They're trained to really, it's like a ranking system. Like you want to win, like you want to win the game, you want to get good scores on your tests, like you want to, it's like in their game, it's like that's not their job, is to make people happy. Their job is to attain a certain rank in the ranking of, men. So it's interesting to me that in a patriarchal system, a woman running for like there, that's so threatening, I think, to so many men's like
yes.
internal systems, whether they are conscious of it or not, to have a woman outrank them in like the most patriarchal of the systems, the presidency, the commander in chief of the military. I mean, it's very like threatening. And I think that I don't even think a lot of people have unpacked that. But I think it's true that at a subconscious level, that seems like a huge loss to them. Like that can't be right. Like that can't be how that goes. Like no way. Because that means they lost somehow big time because they're all then ranking under her, which feels very wrong
Yes.
and threatening at some kind of deep level. And I thought that was a really interesting like analysis. Again, here's my head back up to the head, but I thought that I've never heard that before, but it made a lot of sense to me. I was like, because if that's what they've been taught since they were children, going back to childhood, that yeah. And women are, and I think we think about things differently. I think for women, we're like, well, what about everybody's rights? And what about, this and that? And like, we're trying to take care of everybody. And like, what you just did that how are we going to take, and like, that's not what the game is. I don't think on the other side of the patriarchal kind of thought process. And I'm not, it's so hard to not gender all of this because, men, women, whatever. I'm just thinking that we've all been damaged by this system.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's the collateral damage is that women tend to think about one thing. We think about the world in different ways because that's
Well,
what we've absolutely been trained to do. And we've actually been taught as females to not prioritize ourselves. Like that's selfish. You're being
yes.
bossy, you're being demanding. Like you have to think about everybody else in this room. Like we're chastised from a very early age if we're like, I'm gonna, win. Like, no. Like you want to make sure everybody has a good time. Like that's your role. So I think it's interesting just at a cultural level as we unpack this. Because my heart, I'll talk about my heart, my
Yes.
knowing is that it is a scary world. Like we're living with a massive uncertainties as a humanity, right? So we have climate change, we have pandemics, we have AI, we have things coming, and like, and also we have little, rectangles in our pockets that tell us all about this all day long. Like, and we have wars, and it is incredibly uh uncertain. Like the future is more uncertain, and I don't think it's, and we have things that we have never ever had to face as a humanity before. AI and climate change being two big ones that are like, we've seen war before, you know, we've seen some of this stuff, economic downturns, whatever. Those two things really don't have any easy answers, and we have no idea what's going to happen. Not really. Like we don't know how it's going to spiral. We know it's going to get gnarly. So with all of that uncertainty, I think what I know about humans is that we go to the known. We grasp whatever is
Mm,
familiar. It doesn't matter if it's toxic or not. Like it doesn't matter if it doesn't serve us. That's the family pattern of like, and I think it's helpful to think of nations kind of as families and as these
yes.
top positions as like parents, which is weird. I don't think we should think of it that way, but we do. Like I think that because you hear it, you heard it all throughout the election. Kamala is America's stepmom, and you know, Tim Walz is
Yes.
America's dad. They were using that language in the election, and I
Yes.
was I was noticing that. I'm like, that's weird. Like I'm sorry, but I don't think that's how I think about it. But like they were, and everybody's mind is mythic, you know, so we do
Yes.
take on these things. And so I think as a family system with all of this uncertainty, we the easiest thing for the amygdala to do, like you were talking about, we are humans, we have survival brains, and sometimes those survival instincts serve us. Like you
And
said,
sometimes,
fawn, freeze, fight, you know, flight. And sometimes they put us right back into the pattern we've always been in because at least it's familiar. Like at least we know what Trump's going to do, right? We've seen it before. We don't know what a woman president's going to do. And I mean, that's like my heart is being the knowing of how like we run as our energetic nervous systems go. I'm not saying that's right or I agree with that, whatever. I'm just saying that I
there's not,
understand at a
yeah.
heart level, I understand the need for like something to hold on to that feels like, okay, at least I know that. And it could be really toxic. That's why people go back to their family toxic system. That's why people go back to, you know, abusive partners or you know, jobs they hate or whatever dynamic, you know, because they know it. And at some level, their nervous system is comforted by that in a world that's rapidly changing. And we have a rapidly changing world. There's no question about that. We're in uncharted territory in so many different ways. So my heart, my knowing says this is how humanity tends to operate. And I have some compassion for that, like
Yeah.
at all levels. Because people are, I mean, I really also, you know, it's easy to be like lumping people like, oh, they did this or they thought that. People are complex, you know, and I think that
Yes.
people, they made their choice for lots of different reasons. I'm not exempting racism and sexism as those reasons. I'm just saying at a deep level,
Yes.
I think that part of my known is that that is like our nervous systems are dysregulated, and that's, yeah, the known is what people will turn back to.
Because it's like when you think about what happens when people are dysregulated and what happens when, I mean, one of the teachers in one of the classes I work with said, she's like, I know there are three children in this class that I think have homes in which their needs are met. And I would say that
Mm,
all of the other children are dealing with significant trauma in her class, you know? So like when you think about that magnified, what happens when people are dysregulated? It's like you don't have you're not you just don't have access. Like
right.
when do we problem solve? You have to be feeling pretty, you know, like there's
Yeah.
like and yeah. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about is that, and this is like me trying to self-soothe for sure, but like if she had one, would the anger level, would people be shooting each other right now? And I'm not saying that we might not have some sort of violence anyway, but you know, like I was like, maybe from the universe, we just have not a we're just seeing it from this from our human limitations and from
Mm-hmm.
like in a big picture way. I do think that there's a lot that all of us that are on the planet right now, this is the frickin' Super Bowl
Mm.
for this is like the cosmic Super Bowl. So if you are here right now, you are an elite and maybe you got lost
Yep.
along the way, or maybe you're exactly doing exactly what you're supposed to do. And it's, and I don't know what everyone's mission is, but it's definitely a massive transformation happening on our
Hmm.
planet right now. Just like, like as was
Yeah.
foretold, like crazy. Like it's, we're not making this up. It's not like, it's not ego driven to notice that all the things we've already talked about. Like this is massive, massive transformation of the planet. And I wish we didn't have to do it the hard way. I wish we
So
could
do I.
I
So
wish
do
we
I.
could I wish we could do the free to
Mm.
be me and you and me version of it, but
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things that comes up from my heart too, is just like, God, this planet is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's so massively abundant. Its ability to heal is so amazing. Like it can actually repair so much of the damage we've done if we just would knock it off. Or like if humanity could just get their shit together enough to not try to like destroy everything for 5 seconds, like it is
yes.
mind blowing to me that like, Elon Musk has as much money as he does. Like, who the hell, why does anybody need that much money? Like it's insanity. And I just, yeah, it's like, so yes, like it's it's like, why can't we do this? But that is where we're at, so we have to like look at that, right?
Yes.
Especially as we
Yes.
think about nurture culture and like changing culture. Like, why do we keep, yeah, and I also want to say, like, part of me does react to this, like, half of us were there, half of us were ready to make that step.
Yes.
It wasn't the
Yes.
entire country. Like there was a full half
Yes.
of the country that was like,
Yes.
hey, we will absolutely elect this person. We have we're
Yeehaw.
ready to like do this. And more than half wasn't. So
And it
hey,
wasn't like it wasn't men against women as much as they would put that forth, that it's all like there are plenty of women that voted for him. And
the
there are plenty
majority
of
of
men
the
that voted
majority of
for.
white women did vote for him.
Oh,
And actually the point,
wow.
yeah, yeah, they did.
Oh my God.
And it's wild. Like that's
Wild.
true. And that's also, I think, so, and I want to go back to this childhood idea just for a minute, because, and you said a lot about trauma. And so if we think of this as a model of being there was a part of the grief work that we did. I haven't talked a lot about the grief ritual, but I was so glad I had a grief ritual
Oh,
before
right
this
before
all went down.
this.
Because actually I feel really, it helped me a lot to actually help deal with the emotions that were coming in. And I think it helped me sit with it a lot. I mean, in a really healthy way to have with the grief. A lot of what we're seeing, I think, on a national scale is that we don't have anywhere to put that grief. It turns into anger,
Yes.
especially with men. I think they don't, boys don't cry, that whole thing. Again, that socialization, it turns to anger very quickly rather than being sad about what's going on in the world. And they don't have control and they don't know what to do about it. And so like that's been told, like that's your job, is to fix it, figure it out, and nobody can fix and figure this out. So I think there's a lot of grief in there and a shame. And I think it's
Hmm.
emerging as this angry, like, well, then we'll just try to control it. We'll just get like even like power and control. That's what we do, right? That's what the system would tell you. Yes. And that's the weirdest thing, is that, again, I just want to emphasize, this is exactly what our culture tells you to do. Like it is the predictable result of the culture of what is happening right now. And I don't think we should overlook that.
Yeah.
Um, but
It's
as
well, I think that we have this idea of American exceptionalism that makes it, oh, we, like we're so much smart. It's sort of like this idea of like, we're smarter, we're more attractive, we're like, like Americans are just, friendlier, we're just more everything.
that's for certain.
It is
everything,
like
everything.
everything. We're just more, we're better, and it's like, you really think that, like you can look at any country in the world, and well, for one thing, America was involved in a lot of suffering for the last 150 years. But
I mean, absolutely. We're not, I mean, we can unpack this that way, like for,
yeah,
like, yeah, obviously, but like I said, like this is in line with
yes, yes,
America. This is not
yes,
this is not like this. The surprise would have been her winning. That would have been like,
yes,
whoa.
yes, yes,
And a lot of people have said, like, even Obama, that was like an aberration. Like everything before that was pretty much like standard practice. And so we're almost back to like what, which is why I said it's like we go back to what we know as a culture. This is crazier. It's a crazier version of it, but it's actually not, is not as unusual as a female black president would have been, right? So
Oh, she was so, but so
so
you think about like when someone dies, it's everyone is, if you haven't had a death in your family or you haven't been around somebody who's had a death in their family, it's such a, was it a trope? It's such a stereotype that things can get ugly around like who gets the house or who gets
yeah,
the serving spoon that we used at Thanksgiving or whatever. Like it can get very people because of their acting, lashing out because they're just so overwhelmed with their grief, or they've been holding, like in all the same things, like people act the same way, like they blame each other, they like, it's, yeah,
yeah.
it's, you
Yeah,
know,
we're watching it. We're watching a bunch of kids. I mean, and I wanted to talk just a little bit more about that idea because in the grief work, especially Francis Weller talks about initiations and how, there are no initiations from childhood to adulthood in our culture. Like we don't have this delineation of like, okay, now you can stop being a kid. There's a ritual which like initiates you into now you're a man or a full woman or whatever, right? We don't have that. So we tend to run our culture as like teenagers or children. And I think that's why it's so interesting to me that they frame the political landscape the way they did, like these were our parents, because I think we as Americans really are kind of walking around like we're not, like we want you to tell us what to do, like somebody figure this out for us, like we can't, and I think
yes,
I think that's a big part of what's like people aren't standing in their full adulthood. Like, no, no, no. Like we're fully capable of creating culture on our own. And like, we elect who the culture, like we're the culture here, and that we put our values up there. You represent us. It's becoming this thing like, oh, please rescue us. Like, every 4 years or whatever, like we're going to make a desperate dash to try to rescue us. And that's just not how this is going to ever work because ultimately we're not kids, like we're not children. And so in a culture that kind of likes everybody to be children and be, it's so easy to manipulate and sell things to like to teenagers and children to shame us and to get us to like want to be in this group or that group. Or I mean, everyone's acting like teenagers. I mean, if you really look at the behavior, this is not a mature, like you
right,
said, like thoughtful uh process or even compassion. Like as you get older, you think you'd mature into like, yeah, what is the role of the elder or the mature individual? It would be to look at the bigger group and be like, what is to the benefit of the most of us? What is to the benefit of the children? What's going to serve the 7 generations coming? These are the questions the elders would ask. The adults in the culture would look and say, okay, how can we create something that's sustainable? How can we create those are not the questions being asked by most people. They're being asked like, why is my, gas prices this high? Or like, who's to blame for, you know what I mean? Or like how, I'm not going to let some woman tell me. This is all like real adolescent stuff. And so I think
well and
another
well
piece
and
of the cultural like breakage that we're witnessing, which is, if you want to get just, I guess in my heart, I guess I'm feeling this in my knowing, is that what we're witnessing again is like this other reverberation of that we are not operating as full adults in America as a culture.
well when it's like you've I've heard this thing, like when you have something, like when somebody starts drinking, they often their emotional intelligence kind of gets stunted at whatever age that was that they started using.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I just keep coming back to like the trauma piece of,
Yeah.
which is really the grief piece. When you have deferred maintenance on your emotional body and your energetic body, that is not just your life, but you come into the world and it's like your parents say, "Oh, here, carry this. This is the last 8 generations that hasn't done any emotional work. Good luck."
Good luck
It's
with
like
that.
it's crushing,
Yeah.
and and Yeah, yeah, it's such a trip and such a privilege to be getting to hang out with 5 through 11-year-olds all the time because it's like I don't think that we're different. I don't think I think that we are the same as
Mm,
they are. They're more it's more visible.
mm,
It's more visible when they're children, and so you can kind of see it more. But I really think that we've got the same operating system. We just
mm.
have a bigger body and we can drive cars.
And we can do more damage,
And we can do more.
unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. This is all
Okay, so
blah,
let's
blah.
drop into our guts. We've been
Mm,
talking about our hearts and heads back and forth. Kind of, I don't, you can't. It's hard to know. Sometimes I'm in my head. Sometimes it's from the heart. But I have not talked from my gut yet. I don't think.
take
So
it
let's.
away. Gut
Oh,
belly.
okay.
Belly.
Oh, yeah, dropping in my intuitive hit on all of this. Okay, my intuitive hit is that yeah, think it's like sometimes things have to get worse for people to understand the dysfunction. Like, unfortunately, that if you ignore symptom after symptom after symptom, you make the choice to stay the same, you make the choice to stay comfortable, stay in the known because of trauma. No blame, right? Because of trauma, because of all the generational things, the lesson keeps coming and it will not stop coming until there is a transformational consciousness shift and understanding of how you are participating in this problem and how and your
Mm,
resistance to the solutions at hand. And it is a deeper healing that needs to take place. And unfortunately, COVID didn't do it. I think we got round one with, well, not round one. We've been in many rounds, but one of the biggest rounds that hit like not that long ago, 4 years ago, was a global pandemic. And I think that a lot of us were like, well, we'll change now, right? Didn't we learn something about
yes,
not
yes,
written?
yes.
No, we did not. I mean, look at how quickly the culture shifted back into gear and was like juggernauting again forward. And I think that, all right, now we're going to get something else. And it's going to be another lesson. And I don't feel like it's going to be a very pleasant one at all. But I do think that it's galvanizing this deeper transformation that otherwise maybe you have just been put off. That's my intuitive hit. Could be wrong, but that's how I feel. That's I see that personally in people and I see it in myself. And sometimes things have to get like really kind of dark before people are like,
Mm.
oh shit. It's like rock bottom. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom. And we've had many rock bottoms and we just are like, really? This isn't the bottom? Yeah, I don't know that we've seen it yet, maybe. If this is like some lesson that the universe is the humanity needs to have, you know? And I
Well,
don't know. How does, and I'm trying to stay out of my head here. So how does your gut feel when you think and feel into this moment?
so so one of the things is that we're all in this together. So you can't it's not, like when you're saying like some of us are there, but it's kind of like the bodhisattva thing. We need we can't we can't really leave them behind. You
Yes.
can't, you can't, and it's about when I was cancering, I had this thought, belief, gut feeling that I couldn't I couldn't battle it. That wasn't my route. That wasn't my path. That I had to accept
Mm,
and 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 love and help death doula those cells, and so I had to accept and love them
mm,
even though they were broken.
mm,
And I think that this is like it's like cancer, more like cancer than anything else. It feels like
Mm,
that I have to figure out how to be a love amplifier and that I might die, but I'm not worried so much about dying. So that's not, like I don't want to die. I'd love to hang out and be a kick-ass old lady and keep making art and keep hanging out with little pesky feral children. and, and like love to have chickens again. There's a lot of things
mm,
I'd like to keep on keeping on for a long time, but um yeah, my gut tells me that this is why I'm here. This is
mm,
it.
mm.
This is it. This is the moment. And that if I just, yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like what you said, you have to love what is broken. I really resonated with me when you said that, that we are going to go through this passage of learning. And is exactly like you said, it's exactly why we're here. And so one of the things I want to just resonate from my own self is that when I was looking at this stuff on people pleasing, this is, I really felt like women's role of trying to make everything better and fix it and like get in there and, and soothe every, I think that for me, it's like that is what I am willing to drop. Like I'm willing to
Mhm.
stop pretending that I can fix this. I'm willing to stop pretending that it's yeah. Like there's I just there was something really illuminating about like I can step out of this energy and not from a place of like, oh, I'm scared that if I say something that people will take it the wrong way or that, I'll be seen in this light or I'll be polarizing. Not from that place, but like from if you're in a bad relationship or a toxic, like you can just withdraw your energy. Like I'm not willing to play this. I don't want to play it anymore. Like
Yes.
I'm willing to put energy into what I want to see vibrate with love and healing. And I'm not willing to be in this endless discourse of the culture trying to like, you know, this endless stream of words and energy about like, oh, we can do this or we can do this or we can, like, it drives me all of a sudden. I'm like, this is my boundary now. Like,
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
insane. You guys are all insane. And
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not like rah rah Democrats either. I was like, it's all insane. Like, you guys are all nuts.
Yes.
And I don't, I really, like, if there's any like, you know, faith I ever had in like national, I'm like, I've been over it for a while to tell you the truth, but I am so officially over it now that
Yes.
I cannot put one more drop of energy into this, what's very, very clearly like a system designed to do a certain thing. And it's doing its thing, but I don't like where it's going, doesn't represent me. And so I would like to retract all of my energy from this toxic relationship now and really put it into building culture that I believe in.
Yes.
So that feels really good to me. And if like if nothing else, like for people who have been working and working and working to try to fix and repair and bandage and it's like we really just, I feel at some level have to understand that this is what we got. Like this is what we're dealing with and it doesn't want to be repaired in many
And
levels, like this is not um that's not the role that we're supposed to play. Maybe we need to like back out of this kind of codependent people pleasing
yes.
fixing energy with the
Yes.
culture and as women and as anybody who's in that role honestly, and be like, okay, really, what do we want for us? Like, it's okay, what do we really want and need as people, as energetic beings? Like what do we want to see happen here? And stop feeding the monster of
Yes.
that. So
Yes.
that's also like another, and also to love what's broken. Yes, I agree with that, to have a lot of compassion, and I
But
think we've
but that's
already talked about that.
but
It's like
that's
that,
not this that's not at
it's
all
not
to
the same.
say to
Yeah,
accept that
exactly.
behavior because I think that like part of it is the role of saying absolutely not willing
Yeah,
to play with that, you
yeah, I'm
know?
not playing anymore. Yeah.
Did we ever talk about the red card, black card game?
Mm-mm.
I went to this Ford family. I was did blah 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 community development. And but I went to this really awesome conference. This is many years ago now. and he was a state senator from Nebraska that had done all of this like kind of really progressive um things in his tenure doing that. And his message to all of these people was really came down to this. There are two ways of operating in the world. There are those that are working for each other and for everybody. And then there are those that are only working for themselves and for their own advantage. And it is like a wrecking ball, right? So it's like you have this community thing, and then you have this person come in and they're just like self-serving. And so then they take all the winnings, right? And then everyone else is like left with nothing. The reality is it's there is more. The pie is bigger when you share and when you work together, because then you're like, it's like soil. It's the equivalent of like building soil.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, when you're trying to negotiate and make decisions together, and you identify that someone is not at the table in good faith,
Mm-hmm.
your options are not to like, I'm going to stay true to my desire to be a good person and like keep trying and da da da. No, he said, your option is to say, you are not at the table in good faith. Therefore, I am leaving. There is
Yeah.
no deal.
Yep.
There's no deal unless you're here to, you're here for us to work on our things together. If you're
Yes.
coming from this position of yourself, no deal.
Yep.
No negotiating. And
Yep.
until you are negotiating in good faith, there is no negotiating.
Yeah.
And I think like, having done a lot of collaborative decision making in large groups and small, um, that's a pretty tall order to have people look at themselves and be like, is this just for me? Or am I really here for the reason that we're in this group together? And so
Yeah.
it's like, but I do think that we have to say to those who are who are, what do they call it? Like the black hearts, like those that are self-serving. And we
Mm-hmm.
have, it's like we shouldn't be asking why, like we shouldn't be fighting over minimum wage when there are people that could half their wealth and give everyone could never have to work again in the rest of the
That's
country.
exactly it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The discourse needs to change. We've been talking around, like in
This,
these big
yes.
circles around these like really obvious inequities. It's like, why does, there's massive amounts of money being poured into the Pentagon. Like nobody, like we don't even talk about that. We're just like, oh, but we're all fighting over here for this little scrap of whether people can be forgiven for their student loans. It's like, what are you talking about? Like,
What?
yeah, I
What?
mean, like that's so much a small amount of money. And I mean, I don't even want to get into it, but like that's what I mean. Like the federal government is so clearly not at the table. Like
In good faith. Yes.
the people in power are not in good faith. They are absolutely in service of multinational corporate and military
Yes.
industrial interests, and have been for a very long time and under
Yes.
many administrations. Like I said, this is not a shock. This is not a surprise. This is an
Yes.
escalation of where we're going. And so for me, yeah, I think you said that beautifully. Like, yeah, stop pretending that the people in your like I think we keep as we keep offering solutions like, but what about this, and like wouldn't make this, we should protect this, like that makes sense, right? We should, we're always like, it's like going to people in your family who are just, whatever uncle or something has no interest in listening to you or changing in any way. You could like be the nicest, kindest, most intelligent, approachable, developed communicator in the world. If it doesn't matter, like you're wasting your time, like you're really wasting your energy. And why are you doing that? Because I feel like inside, like what you said, there's a discomfort in us to have not everybody on the same page. And also like, why can't you agree with, like, why don't you see this? Like, why, and it's
Yes.
like we spend so much time there. And what we have to just admit is that the culture is what it is. And it's, like I said, this is America. And we have to be like, okay, America's broken, like deeply, deeply broken.
Yes. Yes.
And the values that it espouses are deeply flawed. Like it's not it's never walked its talk. I mean, come on. So we have to just really like be like, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to work. We're not going to be able to sit at these tables and be like, oh, hey, maybe you shouldn't buy that fighter jet or like bomb. Like that, and I think that get weird. Like also my second point is everyone's just got to get really weird. Like, well, stop trying to be amenable and like pleasant. They're not trying. Like, they're not trying at all. Like, I want to see people just get way more out there with like, if you want to be like as wild as your art and your views and bring it, man, because why not? Like, I think we're here to inspire each other, and we're here to really like, if you said if this is the moment we're here for, then
Then
shine your
bring it.
light, bring it,
Yeah.
bring it now, because don't worry about wasting energy and like trying to, oh, but I have to seem normal, I have to seem I have to make, we have to make,
Because when you do
no,
it, when you risk it,
yeah,
you permission other people to risk it. That's exactly what's happening
yeah.
right now with the
And I think it,
hatefulness is that it permissions those to express their feelings. And so like if you keep small with these big audacious awesome
yeah,
creative like love amplifying
mm-hmm,
things, then you never let people. I've been giving out these I stand for love calendars. I got
mm-hmm,
she had this thing where you could write, you could, like I know this school, blah blah blah. So I wrote and I said, yeah, I'm working with 40 teachers. Can I have 40 calendars? And she sent them to me. So I've been giving them to all of these teachers that I work with. And like this, I just started that this week. And like two of the teachers started crying because they were so touched by
mm,
that, it's like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like what I'm saying is that we are hungry
starving.
we are starving for connection.
That's because even if you're in this culture, you are being traumatized by it. Even if I don't, like even if you realize it or not, even if you
Hmm.
identify with the abuse and because it's normal and it's what you're used to, it is not healthy to be this stressed out, this overworked, this broke, this in debt with no health care. I mean, America's got, everybody's facing these serious problems. And then if
Yes.
you're a person of color, if you're female, if you're pregnant, I mean, there's multiple layers of these problems, right? So we need, like, yeah, we just so need that everybody brings their love and solution, and like not to the table of people who are going to not listen, but to the tables of people who are going to take it, run with it, be inspired. I think
Yes.
we just, and stop giving energy to, like, one of the interesting points that I heard someone say, which fascinated me, was about the media and how the media has changed, and it's changing so fast that like we don't even, like, people aren't, like, the Democrats certainly didn't realize it. Like, this campaign very clearly showed that it wasn't about what Trump, like everyone was like, how can he say all these crazy things? It's like, that's the point. He understands algorithms, and he understands that there's literally millions of people in this country who make their living off grabbing those inflammatory statements and
Yes.
reposting
Yes.
them, whether they love
Yes.
it or hate it. It doesn't matter. That there's an economy
Yes.
of people who have, their job is to do that. So he would
Yes.
say inflammatory things 7 times a day because he was
Yes.
actually smart enough to realize that is the
Or his
media's,
handlers were.
or his team was able to realize, like, that is actually what works, because people grab all of that and they're going to repost it because that gives
Even they're
them,
just like, can you believe he said this?
yeah,
And it's
oh
like
yeah,
now
love or
they're
hate,
making
it
money.
doesn't matter, it does,
It
as
doesn't
long, and
matter.
the more inflammatory the better. So I was like, and this whole, I mean, everybody's like, the Democrats have always just played this like really low key, like, we're just going to try to
Be reasonable
be
because
reasonable. Yeah, we're gonna try to reach across the aisle. Reason is out. Reason has left the building, y'all. Like, and so if reason has left the building in that respect, what's left, I think, is our hearts. You know what I mean? Like, what fills that space then is like, we don't have to be reasonable and talk this out like as reasonable people in some of these arenas. We can just be like, let's just bring
so
all of it, the wild love idea, create. I mean, let's just go, because why not? And I think that whether people realize it or not, there is a knowing, I'm going to love this language, a knowing in them that will respond. And I think what's often happening is that we lean into guilt and shame as our tools of like, oh my God, I can't believe you would, how could you do this?
Yes.
And people
Yes.
get shamed and then they're like, you know what? Stop shaming me. Like, I hate this. I hate you. I hate your
Yes.
whole morally higher than thou, everything's.
Yes.
And I think that I've had moments where I resonate with that, with even like liberals where I'm just like, oh my God, like get off your soapbox. You know what I mean? Like just be real for a minute. There's real things. And I think, yeah, that's where, we could, but all of that's coming from this place of like, you need to be
Yes.
more like it's the person in the family who's trying to make everybody else, you know, make it, fix it, right? Like fix it, make it work, teach everybody what's right and wrong. Stop playing that role. Like that's not your role anymore, just go and do your wildlife because you are wasting your time and energy being that person. It's not, nobody likes it anyway. Nobody likes to be shamed. And you've got so much more to offer. I mean, it's like just like people pleasing in these relationships or these family dynamics. Like, get out of there. Like, get out of your family dynamic and go find your authentic life.
So 100%. And I feel like brought you came to my opening, and this thing about me that openings generally make me crazy anxious. And then I get into my blah 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 puppet, and I have so many fears. I'm so afraid of the mean people because and then it's like I'm so afraid of those like kind of swarmy men that then they come in, they're like they think they're so smart and they love the art world and they've had 2 glasses of wine at the gallery before this one, and then they want to like, oh, well, I don't understand your art. Tell me about it. I mean, the shit that people have said to me over the years.
Oh man.
And so like I just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And my mantra this week was, I am a messenger. If they don't understand, it's not addressed to them.
That's right.
It's just not addressed to them. It's not my job to explain my art to you, and I'm not interested in explaining my art to you. If it doesn't
Yeah.
speak to you, find the art that does speak to you. And
Exactly.
so like that was like my little mantra this week. And then you showed up. And so like my installation, actually the entire gallery is my installation,
So beautiful.
realistically. I mean, I did have the work of 12 artists, but those 12 artists are within the context of the installation that I created in the gallery. It's very different to be, it just is. That is what I do when I do these group shows. It is. They're within the context
Oh yeah,
of the
for
whole
sure.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's not
so,
like there's some people over here. It was like there's a vibe. There was a circle was cast and the
yes.
energies were drawn in and you definitely were holding that space for sure. And it was very, very beautiful and
And
magical.
their work is, I mean, and we talked a lot, like there's collaboration and blah, blah, blah. It's been a year-long process. So, but I feel like I played it small when I did the last show like this 2 years ago. And I was really, like I was like, well, I'm the curator, blah, blah. And it's like, and Annie is like, you are the organizer. You are like this is not just putting the stuff up. And so
Mm-hmm.
like I was really tried to like, even in like last year, I put my name last on the list on the postcard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, that's fucked. I'm on the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
One, I have half the gallery has my big giant ass installation in it. And it is, not to diminish the amazing artists that participated because
Not at all.
their work uplifts my work just as much. It's
Mm-hmm.
synergistic.
Yep.
And so, anyway, cut to the chase. I made a temple.
You did.
And I was like, and it kind of morphed, and I was like, and I realized I'm like, oh, it's the temple of the oracle, because this
Mm-hmm.
is what we need right now, right? Like we
Yeah.
need, everyone is like kind of hungry for, and I had this idea that the world is an oracle. The
Mm-hmm.
world is constantly speaking to us all the
Oh,
time. So
absolutely.
and so anyway, the thing is this like encircling red cloth that's actually spinning on this rug with this monolith, this tangerine silk monolith with these these carved sticks that are dyed. And so somebody's like, what do you mean the oracle, or like, I don't understand. This is like right before you got there. And I'm like, it's the temple of the oracle. And they're like, well, what? And like, those are the oracle sticks. I'm like, the oracle is everywhere, but this is one method. And they're like, what do you mean? And so I just went and I picked them up and then I looked at them and it was like totally boom, here it is. Oh,
Mm.
I'm like, and suddenly I knew what all the sticks meant. I was just like,
Mm.
that's that there's patriarchy and it's the penis shaped one and it's totally pointing right now at Washington D.C. and here's this and here's the sickle which is death and the harvest and it's actually really dangerous here and this da 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 like the like kind of like here's the state of what is was
Mm.
right there in these kind of random sticks pieces of firewood that my son carved and I dyed in matter and
Mm.
so I wasn't like, but anyway, I was just like, and then I was like, oh, that actually is not, that is kind of, that's not a party trick. That wasn't me being sarcastic. That
No.
was like, here it is, you know? And so then like, anyway, so then it was, but, and it was felt like the people were like,
Mm.
oh, right? Like it wasn't. And so anyway, so they kind of created this crazy little weird buzz. And I was like, it was kind of like weird and crazy for me too. And then you guys arrived and you brought me that priestess crown.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I need to stand, I need to be the priestess right now. This is my role right now.
Mhm.
Back to like your job as art. And I feel like this is, I'm talking a lot about how awesome I am right
No,
now.
no, it's so good.
But so then a little bit later, like as we're leaving and we're trying to leave, and this guy was like, "Oh, what do you mean the priestess or whatever?" And then like somebody else had I did another reading for somebody, and then he's like, "Oh, I want a reading," and he's like he's outside the temple, but of course it's cloth. I can hear
Mm.
everything he's saying.
Yeah.
Oh, I really want to meet reading, but his vibe was not my vibe, and
Mm.
so I was just like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna do that." I'm like, that's turning it into a parlor trick. This is not a parlor trick, and
Right.
I'm getting ready to leave. So, but then like at a certain point, he's like, well, what makes it the who's the what's the make and I said, who's like who makes it what makes that the like basically who's it under whose authority is this the Oracle
Mm.
Temple? And I said, it's under my authority because I am the priestess.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you know, like all five, six of me.
That's right.
And like,
That's awesome. Good job.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I
That's
was
what I'm
like,
talking about right there. That's the
that's
energy.
yeah, that was a very long-winded version of
No, it's
cut to the
perfect. I think it's a perfect, I mean, talk about describing what I had just said perfectly. Like you were, and I can't even tell you how good it was for my spirit to go up to Astoria and to go to your show and to see you with this beautiful crown and your beautiful, amazing red installation. And then we went next door to Cambium and they had a man who lives across the street who had like come across because he couldn't feel part of his body, and he goes to their coffee shop a lot. It's like a coffee shop gallery, and he came to them for help. And they had called like his father and an ambulance and everything. So they're like doing an art opening, and there's somebody like literally singing and playing like a keyboard, and somebody doing this other art thing, and a guy being treated with it was just like this incredible. And then during the whole thing, the two women that run that space were just like effortlessly like serving community. They knew this guy. I mean, he comes into their shop a lot, like being of service and like welcoming people in, and like art was going on. It was like the most, you guys together on that block were doing this like most incredible demonstration of what community, real like
yes.
problem solving in real time. So it wasn't just woo woo, it was like all of it happening all together and kind of flowing, and like nobody was put out by it. Everyone's like, yeah, of course we're gonna help. Like, we don't have to shut the art opening down like this. He needs help, we're gonna get him help. It was just so impressive. I actually I bought their shirt, their little fire
Oh,
shirt.
nice.
But because I was, it made me, I mean, Kelly and I were both together, and she was like, what? This is making my heart so happy. It's healing me. And I'm like, yeah, this is why another piece to just for the people, like get out there and see what your community is doing, because there are so many beautiful gifts
Yes.
being shared. And my final things, we probably have to wrap it up, is yeah, I mean, we're all priestesses, and yet, like what you said about the channel, right? Like we're all priestesses, and yet, even with our wit, knowing, and ken, like we have to de-center the human, I think, out of this
Yes.
experience a little bit. Like
Yes.
every indigenous culture on the planet knows that we are not the the solution might not come from the problem, is what I'm saying. Like, we are like that whole permaculture thing. The problem is the solution. Yes, we are going to be the ones that have to heal it ultimately. And like the earth herself is so wise. The other beings on this
Yes.
planet are
Yes.
so wise. And I think one of the ways we can really understand, like a whole other level of understanding how to heal what's going on, is to decenter human knowing in all levels and just channel the color matter, channel red for a minute, like drop into these plant medicines, these, forest medicines, these animal spirit medicines, and like really get, like I said, get weird, like get out of yourself, like get into your power as in relationship to not only your own spirit, but in all the spirits who are here that we haven't been listening to. Because I do think that, this is a collective problem. Well, as we go
Yes.
down, we bring everybody. I think the energetic is like, if we're going to fix this, there's a lot of support for people who are ready to step into the role of healing and helping and envisioning something different. And probably everybody listening to this as one of those people. So just
And
like I was listening,
it might be it might not look like putting on a big art show. It might look like really doing the work to heal yourself.
yeah,
Like that is huge,
so
actually.
huge.
That's I think it's probably mostly that.
It's 100% that. I mean, we can't not do that and expect things to change in your personal life and or the culture that you live in. But
It's
I would say offer that, like, in your quest, like experiment with being like, what would I do? Like, what would a, if I was an elm tree, like what would,
yes, yes,
how would a ocean think about this problem? How
yes.
would a songbird think about this problem? Like, I was listening to John Seed, who is one of the deep ecology founders, and um, he's talking about the council of all beings and how it's like they go into these circles and they all take on the mantle of not a human. They take on, there's a process they go to that, like, where a being will come to them. It could be a raindrop, it could be coronavirus, it could be whatever, but it's not a human. And they sit in these circles and they just kind of channel a little bit, like offer it up, like, what is your words of wisdom? And I think there's real power in that and a place for that now. Like, we're kind of being we're kind of being called to like get out of ourselves egoically as humans and really
Yes.
start to deepen
Yes.
our ways that we bring through the solution here. So that was a lot, but it's been a
It's
big
a
week.
lot. It's been a lot. And then we're going to be off. Do we need to be off for a week?
I am going to Michigan. So yeah, I guess we were going to be off. I'm going to, well, this will be for this week. Oh, we could probably do it next week. We'll see. I might be back in time depending on our schedules, but this is all, we talked a lot and there's a lot we packed into this one. So
It might, you can take it in two. Can you divide it into two? Part one, part two?
I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
Because
Good,
the
good
technical, you
boundaries.
guys can stop listening in the middle and then
And
pick it
then
back up
let's,
again. That
yeah,
would be great.
exactly. Oh, that's great.
I probably, if I thought about that, we probably could have done that. But it might, I'm sure there'll be many conversations. It's not going to be the first conversation we have in this vein for sure as we progress
Oh my
into this
God.
new era. But just, yeah, Iris, I love you so much. Thank you for bringing all of your art and beauty and wisdom to the table. It's
Oh my
really
God.
inspiring.
Oh
If
my
you
God.
guys are around, and how long is the show hanging?
And through December 8th.
Oh
And
man, if
so
you guys have a chance, anybody of you are living in Astoria or around the coast, or if you're coming out from Portland, like really check it out. It is so, so beautiful.
so the gallery is open Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 11 to 3, but I have a key. So if you know me personally, reach out and I could do a private viewing.
What's the name of the gallery again?
It's the Story of Visual Arts Gallery. It's on 1000 Duane Street.
Yeah, so it's just like one block off the main drag. Really, really beautiful stuff. And my final little weird note is that same night we went and saw oh oh my god, the name of the movie about choosing the Pope.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, the word is, I want to say convent, but that's not right. What do they call? Oh, it's
Oh, it's right there. It's right
it is.
there.
It starts with a C. Anyway, conclave. Thank you, brain. And it's all red. The entire
Yes,
cinematography of
yes,
that movie
yes.
is like, I was like, there's a whole nother layer of red. The Catholic Church is just like all these
They
cardinals.
stole it
Oh my goodness. It was so interesting to go to your show and then
and
go
then
see
go
that
there.
movie and just be like, because the cinematography in that movie is astoundingly beautiful. And like, man, their use of the color red is like, it's so powerful. And
Oh,
it
I want to go see
really,
it now.
really brought it home
Is it
for me.
still on? Where'd you go see
It
it?
was at the Columbian. I highly recommend it. It's probably going to win a ton of Oscars. It's a beautiful film, and it has a. And if you guys haven't seen it, see it because man, it's the election of a new pope, and they really pack a lot in about elections and all the sides of it and all the factions and all the. I mean, there it all is. Like they took this one microcosm, and they just you can see all of it going on, all of humanity's process, and oh, it's a really well done movie. So that's
Oh,
my
awesome. Thank you for
feedback.
that. I didn't, I was in my own little world as I've mentioned.
No, I
All
think it's
right.
gonna run for a while.
I adore you.
I
I love
adore
you
you
so
too.
much.
I love
May
you.
you
Everybody keep
be
the faith. You got
faith
this.
to faith. We're here for this.
We're here
So
for this. Mm-hmm.
let's do it.
We are doing it, so we don't
We
really have
are,
a
it's
choice.
true.
Here we go.
It's true. Here we go.
Okay.
All
Love you
right, love
all.
you. Bye-bye.